morning, guys. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters and the Pathfinder School. What I wanted to do today was I came back out here to the location where we released the small bobcat yesterday. I wanted to do a follow-up video to discuss the whys and answer some of the questions on trapping that I've gotten over the course of this series. There are lots and lots of people on YouTube now, and it's a large mega center of knowledge transfer, but there's lots of people on there that are not familiar with trapping, live in cities, don't live in urban areas, didn't grow up in the country, don't have any clue what trapping is, and only know what people tell them, and only know what they read in the media and propaganda and things like that that are against trapping. So what I'd like to do today a little bit is kind of give you some food for thought and a little bit of education into trapping and my mentality when it comes to trapping. And maybe it'll help you understand why trapping is not such a bad thing, and it's definitely not a cruel thing if it's done correctly. So let's first talk about, the theory that every time an animal gets trapped, his leg gets broke. This is the trap that we used yesterday to catch the bobcat. And I want to get a little bit of a close-up on this trap because I want you to see this trap and understand how it operates, because this is called a foothold trap. It's not a leg hold trap. The word leg hold trap is a complete misnomer. As long as the trap is used properly, it will catch the animal in the foot. It is a foothold, not the ankle, not the knee, not the leg, in the foot, just like you were being caught by the hand. All right, so let's zoom in on this for a minute and talk about it. Okay, so this is a Minnesota brand 450 foothold trap. And first of all, what I want you to notice about this is there's a large gap in between these jaws. And what that gap is there for is so that it clamps down in the foot pads or around the foot, and there's space in there so that the bones are not so tightly held. It's basically holding between. It would be almost like you're catching something here and the joints, it can't go past the joints because there's space in here. So these things don't just automatically break animals' legs when they get in these traps or break their foot or anything else. Now, what you have to understand is that a trapper's responsibility is to use the proper trap for the proper animal. This is a Minnesota brand 450. It's designed for things the size of fox. I use them for coyotes as well, and I use a 550, which is a little bit bigger than this. But I generally don't use anything smaller than this on an upland set or a set that is on dry ground like this, where I'm trying to catch canines. We'll talk about the whys of catching canines a little bit later. Right now, I want to cover the traps themselves. So the way a trap works is it has two jaws and a set of springs, and it has a pan. And that pan is under tension. And there's a night latch there that clicks. So the space between here and here is as much as that animal can get inside that trap. It doesn't matter how long his leg is, he can only get this much of it in the trap period because the trap's only so deep. Again, it's made for the size animal you're trying to catch. A coyote's foot is pretty good size. So when he steps on this and trips it off, just like that, it's only going to go this deep into the trap. My finger only goes halfway down into that trap. So a fairly medium-sized animal like a fox or a coyote or a full-size bobcat is only going to have his foot in this trap, not his leg. Does it happen that animals get their legs in these traps? Yes. If you have a very small animal like a skunk or a possum or a raccoon that gets into one of these sets, he can get part of his leg caught in this trap. But again, there's a gap here to help ease that a little bit. Does that mean that no legs ever break in traps? No, it doesn't. I'd be lying to you if I said it did. Smaller animals that get in these traps, the trap doesn't break their leg, but they can get spiral and side-to-side fractures by struggling to get out of the trap. Now, the traps have swivels on them so that they can move in complete circles to help prevent that as well, okay? And these swivels that are on the traps make it so that an animal can spin around, move around in the trap bed and things like that without getting those spiral-type fractures. So the fractures that you get generally are side-to-side fractures, and that doesn't happen very often, and you don't always catch non-target species in these traps. I probably catch one raccoon or possum in these traps every 5 or 6 canines and bobcats I catch. So it's a small percentage. Now, this trap has a certain amount of tension it takes on this pan to push it down to begin with to set the trap off. Again, that helps prevent smaller animals from tripping the trap because they don't put enough downward pressure on the pan to set the trap off on their foot, okay? So offset jaws, size of trap, pan tension, all of those things dictate the type of animal that you're going to catch in that trap, and it's a trapper's responsibility to make sure that he's using the correct traps and the most humane traps for trapping these animals. All right, so I thought we'd go ahead and continue this discussion. We're warm in this tent. Thought we'd go ahead and continue this discussion on the trap line and trapping and Y trap and all that stuff back here at the base camp tent. I showed you the mechanics of a foothold type trap. Now, the other type traps you use are Conibear style traps, which are an X style closing trap, and it is an immediate killing trap. Snares are pretty much, if done right, pretty much immediate killing traps, unless they catch the animal by the body where the loop is a little bit too big, and that can be done easily by mistake, and it can even be done because you have a smaller animal than you planned on coming through the noose and he gets hung around the body, in which case you've got to put that animal down. But the majority of the time, snares are designed to kill the animal in fairly short fashion by strangling him. The tighter he pulls against it, the tighter it gets around his neck. It has a reverse lock, so it can't come undone, and eventually the animal suffocates and dies. So let's talk about, first of all, humane kills, okay, on animals. If we're going to use a Conibear style trap, and I use those type traps around water. In the state of Ohio, you can't even use those type traps that are very large. Anything over 5 inches of jaw size or opening size on the Conibear trap, you can't use on dry land. They have to be in the water for things like beaver. The reason for that is because canines can also put their head through those type traps, and they are an immediate killing trap. If you're using some kind of a coon cuff, I've went over those in videos before too. It's basically just a bar that comes up and traps the animal's hand inside a tube like a handcuff, so to speak. It really doesn't damage their hand. It just clamps down on the bone in a circular fashion and keeps their hand inside the cookie jar, if you will, until you get there to either release or dispatch them. And again, those are created so that only animals with dexterity in their hands can get in there to manipulate and to get the food out of the tube and pull the trap trigger to get trapped in the trap. So mainly you catch possums, raccoons, skunks. They're called dog-proof traps that they use for raccoons because they're dog-proof. I have seen one cat, actual domestic cat, get caught in a coon cuff just recently on my Facebook group, Pathfinder Learning Center. But that's the first time I'd ever even seen that. Generally, they catch animals that have lots of dexterity in their hands to reach in to manipulate that mechanism to set off the trap. So those are the three main type traps that you have. You have a foot holding trap, you have a Conibear style trap, you have a coon cuff or dog-proof trap, and then you have snares. And then you also have live cage traps. Live cage traps are better used around urban areas because to get an animal to walk into a cage style trap in the wild is pretty difficult. Now, so that brings me to the discussion of ethically killing animals, because not all traps are designed or will kill an animal immediately. And you really don't want them to be. And that's a part of this discussion we need to have too. People say, why would you use a foothold trap? Why don't you use something that kills the animal? If you do that, anything that gets in that trap is going to be dead, whether it's a non-target animal or not. So if you have an animal in that trap and he's alive, let's use the bobcat for an example. That trap was set up to catch canines, coyotes mainly, okay? We'll talk about the whys of that in a minute. But any trap that you set like that in an upland area, you can say it's a coyote set, you can say it's a fox set, you can say it's a bobcat set, you can say whatever you want. But anything that comes up to that trap bed that's a predatory animal, animals are sniffers and humpers by nature. That animal is going to stick his face in that hole or in that tube or whatever you've got in that trap, or he's going to hike his leg on it, and he's liable to get in that trap. Whether it's a bobcat, a coyote, a fox, a raccoon, it doesn't matter what it is. But animals are going to get in that trap that you don't want there. You can dictate the size of those animals by the size of the trap tension, things like that. But the traps that I have out here, they're set for coyotes in particular. again, we'll talk about that in a minute, catch fox. They catch bobcat. Every once in a while, they'll catch a coon or a possum, but it's not very often. Mainly, it's been fox and bobcat and coyotes this year is the main thing that I've caught out here. And that's really my intention, is to catch the coyotes, which we'll talk about. However, if those traps killed those animals immediately, I could not release the bobcat, which is a protected species in the state of Ohio. So now you've killed an animal that was an endangered species for no reason while you're trying to control another species like coyote. With that animal having his foot in that trap, not injured, caught by the foot in that trap with space between the jaws, it was easy enough to let that cat go, runs off into the woods. His foot might be numb for a couple hours, but he's fine. He's fine. There's no question about it. And I look very closely at these animals when I release them to make sure they're not injured before I let them go. If they're injured, I will generally put them down. Unless they are a protected species, then I need to call the Department of Natural Resources here and ask them what to do. That doesn't happen to me very often. I've never had a cat injured in a trap, and I've caught many, many bobcats out here. So that tells you that those traps don't injure very many animals. The animals I've injured in traps like that have been animals that shouldn't have been in those traps and just were attracted to the set for some odd reason, like a raccoon or a possum. And if those animals are injured, I put them down, and I utilize those animals for intermediate classes, for teaching cooking classes, for YouTube videos. I give the skins and the hides away to Boy Scouts, things like that have tanning projects they're doing, or just people that are local to me, or students that say, hey, I want to tan a hide. Well, here you go. I don't sell fur. That's not the reason that I'm doing this. We'll talk about the reasons in a minute. So what I want you to understand is the humane part of this, okay? If you're going to trap an animal and you're going to hold him in place, it doesn't matter if he's in a cage or if he's in a foothold trap or if he's in a snare. If he's not dead when you get there, you have two choices. Release him or kill him. And what's the most humane way to kill an animal? Is usually a bullet. It's not smacking him in the head with a club. It's not stabbing them with a spear. But the most humane way to do it is to put a bullet in that animal. Now, I had a lot of questions about why did I shoot it at an angle into the chest cavity instead of shooting it in the head. The simple answer to that is too much blood. All right, if you shoot an animal in the head, they bleed a lot. They also go almost immediately into what's called death throes, which means they're wriggling around and they're slinging blood everywhere, all over the set, in the trap, on their body, on the fur, and it's just a big mess for no reason. You can shoot an animal right behind the shoulder and the chest cavity, depending on the angle that the animal's at to you. You have to adjust your sight placement for that, and he will be dead in less than 10 seconds. There's no question about that. That's a humane death. If you don't think it is, go to a slaughterhouse. So, with that being said, putting down animals humanely, the best way to do that is to shoot them. I do shoot some animals in the head. If I have an animal in a trap or a snare in an area where I'm not going to reset that trap at all, I will shoot the animal in the head, especially if it's an animal that I don't care about how difficult it's going to be to skin with the skull being damaged. Because that's the other problem you incur sometimes when you shoot an animal in the head. If it damages the skull too much, it makes it difficult to skin, and then you're going to ruin the hide, at least the face area of the hide, trying to get that hide off the animal. As far as how quick it kills the animal, that's up for debate. But I can tell you now, it's quick enough just by shooting them in the heart. Doesn't make a mess of the set. The animal doesn't suffer. You saw that with the coyote yesterday. He basically just rolled over and died, and it was over and done with. The only reason I cut the camera was to leave some of him gasping for air for 2 or 3 seconds out of the video. All right, enough said on that. So now to the question of why am I trapping to begin with? Why do people trap? People trap for different reasons. Some people still to this day trap for a living. They're using the glands, they're using the skulls, they're using the hides. You know, there's not a lot of money in the fur market nowadays, even though, remember, this country was built on the fur trade. It's simple as that. If you do your research, you'll find out this entire country was built in the beginning on the fur trade. So the fur market is way down, but still, people still make money by tanning those hides out and selling them as a tanned fur. You can still make good money on furs that way. I don't choose to do that. If I were in a situation where that was my living, that's what I would do. However, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to manage my land. I have 186 acres here that backs up to a 4,000 acre wildlife area. I bought this land 7 years ago. When I bought this land, the only thing I ever saw were deer. I hardly saw, and squirrels and things like that, rabbits, but very little other game animals. As I started to trap the coyotes and thin out the possums, I started to notice animals coming back, especially the turkey. The turkey flourish around here now. I see turkey everywhere on this property all the time now. Those never used to be here. Remember that coyotes have no natural predators. None, okay? And that is just a simple evolutionary thing. We have the animals that used to prey on coyotes in this area, if there were coyotes in this area to begin with, are long since extinct or gone. So now the coyote that's moving into this area is the top apex predator with no predators whatsoever to control the population. So when I first started trapping out here, I would catch coyotes, I would catch possums, I would catch raccoons. I never even saw turkey. I would never catch a fox, never catch a bobcat. Now, after a few years of trapping out here, I'm starting to see lots and lots of turkey. I'm starting to see lots of quail. I'm starting to see more rabbits in the population. I'm starting to see more fox. This year I've caught 4 fox in about a month, and that's more fox in 1 year than I've probably caught the entire time I've trapped this property over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. I've caught a couple grays and a couple reds, but never 4 in one season. So that tells me that the red fox are coming back, and I'm letting them go to ensure that they can continue to breed while trying to eliminate some of the coyote population. Same thing with the bobcats. They're protected. You don't see that many. I catch 1, 2, sometimes 3 in a whole trapping season. I've only caught 1 this year. We let that go yesterday. We reported to DNR, and I reported to the DNR website, as well as sending my DNR officer a picture and a timestamp when he knows that animal was caught on this property and where it was at. That's responsible land management. Remember that I live in a rural area. I don't live in Philadelphia or Chicago or New York City. I live in an area that next door to me, there are over 500 head of cattle. I have physically heard in my classes, and my students can attest to this, packs of coyotes killing what sounded like a dog, the way it was yelping, off across the 2-lane blacktop on the other side of the school property, probably in someone's yard. Coyotes are very, very voracious hunters. They kill livestock. They kill chickens. They kill goats. They kill cattle. They kill deer. They kill turkeys. They kill pheasant. They kill quail. They kill anything they can catch. And they hunt in packs. So you have to be cognizant of that and understand that if nature can't control that species, as intelligent human beings with land management in our minds, we have to be the ones to do that. So that's the reason that I trap coyotes. Now, let's go back to the reason for using the type of traps that I use, the foothold type traps. Like I said, I do use conibears. I do use snares in certain circumstances, depending on the animal species I'm trying to trap. But I frown on snares quite a bit unless I know if I'm going to trap something like a beaver on a slide, I'll use a snare. If it's somewhere I don't want to carry a 330 in there, I'll use a snare. Because I'm pretty 99.999% sure the only thing going to get in that snare is going to be a beaver. I snared some coyotes on a fence line out here last year, and I ended up having a deer duck under a fence instead of going over the fence, put his head through, her head, it was a doe, through a coyote snare, killed her dead. Did I want to kill that deer? Absolutely not. I reported it, DNR came, picked it up, donated it to a food bank. But the point is, it was a non-target species that was dead, and I had no choice in the matter of releasing it or not releasing it by using that snare. It's the same thing with a conibear. With a foothold type trap, I'm now given that choice and that management decision of, is the animal in this trap something that I want to eliminate to control those populations like the coyote, or is it something that I want to release back into the wild so that it can breed and reproduce? And with that foothold type trap, I have that option. You don't have that option with other types of traps necessarily, like snares, like conibears. So that's the reason I use the type traps I do. And again, everything has give and take. Do some animals get injured in foothold type traps? Of course they do. If you get a possum, in a coyote trap, that the jaw height is this far from the pan, he's going to get his entire leg in that trap and be up to the shoulder in that thing if it's a front leg catch. Is it going to break his bones? Not when it catches him, but he could break his bones trying to get out of the trap or from side to side movement, in which case he'll have to be put down. But again, that percentage is very low. Once you start using things like snares, 90% of the animals you come to are going to be dead, no matter what they are. Coyote, fox, deer, bobcat, whatever walks through that snare is going to be dead when you get there. I've released, I can't tell you how many raccoons out of traps because they were either too small and I didn't want to use them for the meat, I didn't want to use them for a class, or we were teaching trapping and showing people how they can use coon cuffs or dog-proof type traps to control raccoon populations around an urban environment, but we demonstrated that here in a wild environment with those type traps. They're very good for that. So there's lots of things that trapping is very, very good for. There's lots of reasons that trapping should be something that you understand, that you are well educated in, that you don't just frown on, okay? People say trapping is so cruel, trapping is so cruel. Killing an animal that's in a trap is cruel. Killing an animal with a trap that you didn't intend to kill is what I call cruel. Killing an animal that's in a trap that you meant to catch and he's sitting there waiting on you when you get there, that's not cruel. That's just controlling the population of that species. Okay, that's a lot of talking head crap, and I apologize for that, but I really think that trapping education and educating the public on trapping is an important thing, especially in the outdoors nowadays, because there are reasons to trap. If you've never done it, you live in an urban area, you live in a city, you've never witnessed what they can do in suburban or country areas, you've never trapped before and things like that, I wouldn't expect you to understand it, and that's why I'm making this video. But I would expect you to at least have enough respect to watch and listen to this video before you make comments about how cruel trapping is and how mean of a person I am. I care more about these animals than a lot of people do, that's for sure. But I also understand where my food comes from, and it doesn't come in a cellophane wrapper at Walmart all the time. And I've been to slaughterhouses and I know what they look like, and I know the difference between humane and inhumane. Trust me. All right, guys, well, I appreciate you joining me out here today for this video. Just a quick follow-up to yesterday's video. I had a lot of pushback on that. I knew I would when I posted it, and that's okay. You know, part of education is putting yourself out there and letting people say their piece, and then explain to them why you do what you do. So I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, for all of my sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back with another video in this series as quick as I can, guys. Beaver season's coming up. Stay with me.